It was the summer of 1982, and the friends I had grown up with were all really excited. For I grew up in Knoxville, and all of my friends who grew up there were eagerly anticipating the World's Fair that summer of 1982. People were going to come around from all over the nation, from all over the world, from the globe, and experience the technological wonders and the cultural experiences that would otherwise have remained a mystery had they not had this venue to discover these wonders. Interestingly, and just kind of a moment of trivia for you, Knoxville hosted a World's Fair in 1982. New Orleans hosted a World's Fair in 1983. No city in the United States has done it since. The World's Fair in Knoxville went fine. There weren't any major problems with it, but it was not the amazing experience when I was there of kind of non-stop discovery that I had hoped for. The truth is, when you talk to people about the World's Fair, who were my age back then or a little older, rather than talking about the technological marvels they encountered, most people talk about how really cool the beer house was. In retrospect, most people in Knoxville realized that theirs was the sunset of World's Fairs as an event. The information age had begun. We did not yet have the internet in 1982 in that way, or the kind of on-demand information that you and I experience, but the information age had begun. 1980 was the year that CNN began and the 24-hour news cycle. So it was hard for a city to exhibit anything in 1982 that everybody who attended the exhibit wasn't able to find out someplace else. 2 weeks ago, Apple had its conference, its Worldwide Developer Conference, and there's, as is always the case, a keynote address from the head of Apple who speaks. At 1 o'clock Eastern Time, the keynote address was streamed for all who wanted to see it, and millions of people across the United States, across the world, tuned in on their televisions, on their phones, on their iPads, on their computers, in hopes of catching the first glimpse of some marvelous new technology that they would be the first to know about. We are a society that has been, for the last 35 years, obsessed with marveling at our own ingenuity. We devour new technologies, and just as quickly we become bored with them and long for something newer, faster, glitzier. I bring this up because we are unique in this way. It's not always been this way for humanity, and it's not even this way for all people across the globe, but it is true for us in this time and place. We are a society that is fascinated with, obsessed by, and overly focused on what has been newly created, which really makes it difficult for us to get anything out of the parable today. You see, today's parable, I imagine, I don't know if this is true, but I imagine today's parable takes place as Jesus has a bunch of people who are wandering along with him along a path. And he comes across a grain of a wheat field, and he reaches out and plucks a shaft of grain, takes the head of the shaft and rolls it in his hand and begins to look at the seeds of the wheat in his hand. And I'm imagining as he's looking at that, he's talking to people, telling them about the kingdom of God. The people of Jesus' time listen to examples like that about the grain of wheat that they know so well, the seed that falls on the ground and the grow. The point of the parable is not to teach the people about something brand new that they've never known before about seeds. It was to take something that they know incredibly well and connect it to God so they can discover something about the nature of God without even really having to think about it. But that which is familiar to the people at the time of Jesus is not really a part of our everyday experience. This parable doesn't speak to the world in which you and I live every day. I was thinking about it as I was preparing for this sermon, and I've almost 30 years been a priest. I've served 4 churches in 4 different cities, and I have not had, to my knowledge, a farmer in any single church I've ever lived in. We are remarkably detached from the growing cycle of the food we eat and the earth that we enjoy its abundance. We live in a world in which rain is not really something that we get excited about because it helps our crops grow. Rain is seen as the reason we're going to have to wash our car again tomorrow. Or rain is maybe the reason that, well, we won't have to water the lawn today. The seed, the rain, the weather were of immense importance for people at the time of Jesus. They were personally and intimately aware of how tied they were to these things, and they saw them, therefore, as intimate gifts of God that surrounded them every single day, of which they were the beneficiaries. This leaves us in a difficult position, not just when encountering Jesus' earthy parables, but when opening ourselves up to our relationship to God and God's relationship to our creation and our relationship to the creation in which we live, we're at a bit of a loss. We are a culture that's not really interested in creation. We are interested in our creations. We're not interested in the earth around us and the trees and the environment. We're interested in the things we can make out of those, what we can manufacture, what we can marvel ourselves with. We marvel at our own technology, our ingenuity, and we clamor to discover new wonders that can help us control our environment, our lives, and the world around us. When our greatest interest is in our own accomplishments, when our greatest interest is in our own inventions, there's little place in our learning to discover our relationship with God and God's world. We marvel at our own accomplishments. We revel in our power and our technology, and consequently, we begin to see this planet as ours rather than God's. I'm not sure that we can see the hand of God at work if we are solely focused on our own marvels and our own creations. Which leaves us in an interesting place, which is, I believe, our spiritual as well as our personal well-being are tied to this planet Earth. And our understanding, our place in it, and our role in it. 2 months ago, you may recall, if you were here, we celebrated and talked about Earth Day. And one of the things I did on Earth Day is I just announced that I talked a little bit about plastic straws and announced that in our household we were going to begin to try to curtail the use of plastic straws. If you weren't here on that particular day, our use of plastic straws is really staggering. We use, in the United States, enough plastic straws to circle the globe 2.5 times every day. And when you think about the amount of plastic that's putting in the environment, the amount of plastic that's putting into our oceans, the amount of plastic that's contributing to that mass of garbage they talk about in the Atlantic that's twice the size of Texas, it's staggering for something that we use for 15 minutes and then throw away. So on that particular day, during the announcements, I spoke about straws, and I announced how my family had decided we were going to stop using plastic straws. We've even purchased reusable straws. We have little metal straws we keep in the car, so if somebody really wants a straw, we can use one. We just take it and reuse it, wash it, and put it back in the car. But we've decided not to have them in our home. We've decided not to use them in restaurants. So let me tell you how we're doing. I'm going to give you a report after 2 months. We're really struggling with this. It's been really interesting. It is not our resolve. We really want to not use straws. But that's a harder resolution to keep than you would think, because the moment you go into a restaurant, it's as if everybody is getting paid to somehow get a straw into your drink. They will put them on the table before you've even sat down. Or as your drink comes, it will come with a straw already in the drink from the kitchen. Or you don't get straws and you're delighted, and all of a sudden the waiter has reached for a handful of straws and thrown them in the middle of the table, and not only are they thrown in the middle of the table, but they hit that wet spot, so they've absorbed all the water, and you know they're going to be thrown away whether you use them or not. We're discovering that not using straws is quite the endeavor. You have to almost walk into a restaurant and say as you get to the front door, by the way, we're no straw people. And if you want to get some great looks from servers, just say, we don't use straws. Well, what kind of freaking weirdo are you? That's something to take a stand on, straws. If you ask me, our family's getting about a C- in the whole straw thing, because we really haven't figured out how to work this out yet. But let me tell you the other part that's interesting. The past 2 months have been marginally successful on getting restaurants not to give us straws. We've not been perfect at eliminating them from our consumption. But in the process of trying to do that, we have been awakened by just how difficult that is. 2 months of discovering how difficult that is leads me, and I'll admit, I now have this overwhelming pang of guilt. Every time they place that straw on the table and I know it's going to go in the garbage no matter what, I know that one's going in the middle of the Atlantic. Somehow I just know that one's going in the middle of the ocean. And as I feel guilty about it and look at it, it's caused me to look at the entire restaurant differently. Because I look at those 3 straws that I'm bothered with that I know are going to get thrown away, and then I go, but they've also given us plastic utensils, or we've also gotten paper towels, or we've gotten paper cups, or we had a little spill on the table and they brought over a wad of paper towels that is half of a tree in order to clean it up. And I start looking around the restaurant, just because of this endeavor with straws, I start looking around the restaurant and thinking, how much of this stuff is single use and going to be thrown away after this meal? I've started paying attention just because of this marginally successful straw endeavor. I've started paying attention to how much gets thrown out in restaurants per person who eats there. And it's been a surprisingly spiritual discipline for me. Just paying attention to straws has caused me to be much more aware of all the other small pieces of plastic that I throw away or that get thrown away on my behalf every single day. So now that I've told you we've tried to do this straw thing, and I've told you I really haven't been terribly successful at it, but we've been trying, I want to invite you to join me on this or something like it. I'm going to give you a challenge. Pick something. Pick plastic straws that you're going to give up. Or pick plastic utensils that if somebody hands them to you, you're going to take them home, wash them, and put them in your drawer. See how many begin to accumulate there. Or if you use plastic bags, take a month and just collect those plastic bags. Put them on a table. Just let them collect over a period of time for a month, just to give yourself some sense of how much impact you have. The reality, it really doesn't matter what you do. You could do one of those, you could do something else. It's just picking something that you're going to be intentional about and begin to pay attention to, because if you're like me, and you're probably a lot more attentive than I am, you're going to discover that once you begin to pay attention to that, you begin to notice a lot of things around that. And then in the process, it is that simple lifestyle change that's one that will lead you to discover, hopefully, your place in God's creation. I'm not going to be a farmer, so I'm not going to have that sense of my place in creation. But I can become aware of my place in God's creation and my connectedness to creation and my impact upon creation by some of the choices and the decisions I make. If you give this a try, let me know. I'd love to hear about your discoveries and your struggles as you do this in your own home. If you decide to collect something, like see how many plastic bags you all collect, or see how many, send me a picture of it. I'd love to see what you learn. As we strive together to serve God by protecting and respecting this fragile earth, our island home. Amen.